Awesome.
Wow. Thank you so much.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yes, thank you so much for coming and being our guest speaker. This is so cool.
No, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here, even if it's virtually. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of figure out. A lot of students are trying to figure out what they want to do with their degree, right? And some people don't even think that serving as an officer in the Marine Corps is an option. You know, when I was in college, I had no idea, like I said, that I could even serve as an officer at all, right? Having a college degree is one of the many requirements, but what drove me to want to serve is my passion to serve my community or serve my country. Coming from a criminal justice background, 9 times out of 10 with a degree like that, you're trying to serve in some capacity, right? Whether it's in law enforcement or law or something of that nature. And just having this as an option or an opportunity, I think is wonderful. And it's through a fraternity that I was a part of that I learned about it. So thank you so much for having me so I can talk to you all.
Absolutely. You're amazing.
Right.
I'm so excited.
Okay, so several things that we're going to talk about today. The first thing is just a basic introduction about me. I bet you're wondering, you know, what experience does she have that she can talk to us about? Well, a little bit experience. I've been in the Marine Corps for 7 years now, a little bit more. Then we'll dive into the guest speaker questions that were presented to me prior to joining you all. And then I left an opportunity at the end for some more questions and answers that I can do for you all. All right. So these are just some amazing pictures of some of my Marines and some of my brand new lieutenants in the Marine Corps. The top left, he is actually, believe it or not, a judge advocate in the Marine Corps. So he's a lawyer in the Marine Corps. But that's him at his officer training. Top right is me re-enlisting one of my Marines for another 4 years in service, which as an officer is one of the most wonderful things that we can do, because that means that that Marine is going to stay in the Marine Corps and add more value and grow as a leader for another 4 years minimum. He actually transitioned from military police to criminal investigative division. So now he's a CID Marine. So it's really unique, right? Bottom left is my Marines and I on our deployment in Norway. So I am a military police officer, and every single Marine in that photo is a military police man or woman. And I bet you're wondering, what do military police do in the snow? Well, we're going to dive into that on the next slide. And then bottom right is another one of my lawyers that is getting his first salute as an officer, which is a huge deal for us. It means that you are an officer in the Marine Corps, and the Marine that gives you your first salute is a Marine that has influenced your life in a large capacity. So the Marine that's giving that lieutenant his first salute is also a military police Marine who's been in the Marine Corps for 11 years now. He enlisted, he actually tried college, didn't like it, enlisted in the Marine Corps, got his degree in the Marine Corps, and now he's at officer candidate school to become an officer in the Marine Corps after serving for 11 years on the enlisted side. So these are just some great photos that I grabbed from my folder to share with you all.
These are amazing.
Next. Awesome. Thank you. So introduction. My name is Captain Jennifer Norena. I'm obviously with the United States Marine Corps. You've gathered that by now. I am a first-generation American, first-generation college student, first-generation Marine, and first-generation Marine officer. Nobody in my family has ever had the opportunity to serve in the United States of America. I come from a Colombian family, and it's something that is exactly my family's background is exactly what drove me to want to serve in some capacity. For as long as I can remember, I knew that I wanted to get into law enforcement. When I was 7 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I quickly realized how long law school is and the requirements to become a lawyer. And I said, you know what? Not for me. So I'm going to become a police officer. When I was around 14 years old, one of my best friend's dad, who's like a second father to me, he actually worked for Hollywood Police Department at the time. I'm from the area. So it was through him that I learned about what police officers actually do. Because at 14 years old, all you see is the uniforms and you see them riding around in cop cars. You don't really have a clear understanding on what they do. He would come to our volleyball games and our soccer games and talk to us about his experience as a police officer. When I was old enough, he let me do a few ride-alongs with him, and that is where my passion for criminal justice grew. So I knew I wanted to be a police officer. In college, I learned about becoming a Marine Corps officer. So knowing I wanted to serve my community, I also wanted really to serve my country. The reason why is because this country has offered my family so many wonderful opportunities that we wouldn't have anywhere else. And I wanted to give back. And I knew that serving my community was going to do that, but I wanted to give back at an even larger scale. So I knew I wanted to join the military. I found a way to tie both of those together, and it was through the Marine Corps officer program. So using my degree to become an officer in the Marine Corps to serve my country. And I was blessed enough to actually get assigned military police officer as my job specialty as well. So I've served as a military police officer for the last 6+ years. I commissioned, so I became an officer in the Marine Corps on August 7th in 2015. So I've been in a little bit more than 7 years. In my last 7 years, I have served as a platoon commander, which means as a platoon commander, you're in charge of a platoon of Marines, and a platoon of Marines can be anywhere from 20 to 35 Marines. I was really lucky. I had about 34 Marines as a brand new college, like fresh out of college. I was now in charge of 35 Marines that some were 18 years old, and my oldest Marine was almost 40 years old. So it's really crazy to imagine that as a brand new college student, I was now going to be a manager, a leader of all of these wonderful Marines. But the Marine Corps trained me for it. So I was confident that I could do it. Because of my Marines performance, when I was a platoon commander, we got assigned a deployment. And our deployment was actually to Norway, of all places, which was pretty incredible. So that was that photo with all the snow on the first slide and the second slide. We got the opportunity to attach to one of the infantry units as the military police detachment and support their operations with their patrols and everything else like that, which was a great experience working with an infantry unit, being in a detachment. You know, I always felt like I was part of the team. I never felt like I was a stepchild to the unit. The thing about the Marine Corps is regardless of what your job specialty is, what your job is, you are always going to feel like you are part of that unit as a family. And that was truly incredible. I met some of my very best friends in the Marine Corps on that deployment. So it was incredible. Then I came back and I became the company executive officer for my company. So I grew in my ranks from a platoon commander, being in charge of 35 Marines or so, to becoming a law enforcement detachment officer in charge, to now a company executive officer. I was in charge of about 200 plus Marines that, and not just the enlisted Marines, but now I was in charge of my officers as well, because I was a captain at that point. So it's really incredible to see how much growth you do in the Marine Corps in such a short amount of time. And because of my performance on that duty, which was 3 years total, I then got selected to come out here to be an officer selection officer for South Florida, to now find new officers to put them through the Marine Corps. So that's a little bit of my backstory. Again, these are some wonderful photos. I love the top right picture. I have a twin sister, and my sister and I, that's us dressed as little campesinas for Halloween. That my mom always instilled our culture in us. And I was very grateful for that, because that's what helped me gain an appreciation for all the opportunities that we have here, not forgetting where we come from. And then the bottom left photo was graduation day at Officer Candidate School. My twin sister and I, that's the longest we had been apart. It was 10 weeks. And she was happier than I was on graduation day, believe it or not. But the moment she saw me in uniform, she just broke down in tears, and my mom captured it. So I have that photo framed, and it's one of my favorite pictures ever. All right, so these are some of the guest speaker questions that were presented to me. The first, and I really love this question, is what is the most rewarding part of being part of the Marine Corps? So this question, I took a long time to think about the answer, because I wanted to capture it correctly. And what I would say to that question is that the most rewarding part about being a part of the Marine Corps, about being a Marine and getting the opportunity to wear the uniform every single day and represent our country, is without a doubt the privilege and the honor that really comes with serving, and serving others, most importantly. As a Marine Corps officer, something that I truly appreciate, and I make my lieutenants appreciate, is that it is never going to be about us as the officers. As officers, we put our Marines before us. It is always going to be about our Marines. We have to accomplish the mission, but more importantly, we have to look out for the welfare of our Marines. And really having the opportunity to do that as a brand new college graduate, you know, with some leadership experience, but not really having any real life experience. That's something that I was terrified of. Joining the Marine Corps and becoming in charge of people at that management level, you have to work your way up there in the civilian world, right? And in the Marine Corps, once you make it through that initial training, you are set. You are immediately in that manager and leadership role. And the opportunity to have Marines under your charge and really make sure that they are taken care of and make sure that they accomplish the mission. Watching them grow is truly incredible. For example, when a Marine signs a contract, it's usually about 4 years, right? Coming up on that 4-year mark, they have the opportunity to do what's called re-enlistment, which means they stay in the Marine Corps for another 4+ years. When a Marine comes to you and tells you, ma'am, can you please sign my re-enlistment document? That is truly incredible because it just goes to show that they continue to love the Marine Corps and they want to give back. When they re-enlist for another 4 years, they're now developing themselves as a leader and they're growing as a leader as well. You know, and it's really humbling when they come to you and ask you, can you be my re-enlistment officer? Because that means that you played a role in their growth as a Marine, so much so that they want you to be a part of that monumental moment for them, if that makes sense. So it's truly incredible to watch your Marines grow and have a role in their growth as well. I will never forget that one of my rock star Marines told me that when I came here, she told me that she was getting out of the Marine Corps to join the Air Force. She said, I wanted to join the Marine Corps to be a Marine, but my mom retired from the Air Force and now I want to get out of the Marine Corps and continue my service in the Air Force. And in the 3 years that her and I worked together, I have seen her come out of her shell, really grow as a leader, make a huge impact on our unit and the Marines in our unit. And I told her, if you decide to get out of the Marine Corps is going to lose a good one, but the Air Force is going to gain a great one. And anything that you need in order to make that transition, you let me know and I'll do it in a heartbeat. So 6 months later, she sent me a text message and she said, ma'am, I did something today. And I asked her, what did you do? And she sent me a picture of her re-enlistment ceremony for the Marine Corps. She said, I decided to stay in a little bit longer because my time is not done here in the Marine Corps. And it was awesome to hear her say that, right? Because she told me that the leaders that she had in her time in the Marine Corps for those 4 years are the reason why she decided to stay in. And I was here in Miami at the time. And she told me, if you were here in Camp Lejeune, ma'am, I would have asked you to be my re-enlistment officer. And that was such a wonderful moment. You know, she's still in, she's a sergeant now. She's been promoted ahead of her peers twice in her career. And just watching her continue to grow, even after you've parted ways, is truly incredible. And it's very humbling to have the opportunity to be that for somebody. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would say that is the most rewarding part about being a Marine Corps officer and being a part of this institution. And then the other thing that stood out to me was that the friends that you make in the Marine Corps really become your family, you know? And I don't say that just to say that, right? So the top right photo, those are all the girls that I graduated from officer candidate school with. And I promise you, if I picked up the phone and called any single one of them right now, they would answer in a heartbeat. And I would do the same thing for them. You develop these friendships because you go through tough times with your other candidates at OCS or with your Marines in the big Marine Corps. And you start to develop these friendships that stay with you for the rest of your life. The bottom left photo right there, her name is Captain Clayton. I met her through my initial training. She's one of my best friends. She's a pilot. We could not have more separate jobs and we will likely never work together, but she is still one of my very best friends. I talk to her on a weekly basis. She is out in Okinawa, 13 hours ahead of here, and we still make time for each other to catch up and you know, see how she's doing, see how I'm doing, and everything else like that. The friendships that you forge in the Marine Corps become your family. So that's the other thing I would say, that those are the two most rewarding things about being part of the Marine Corps. I hope that answers your question, Alyssa.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh wait, I am unmuted. I was like, am I muted? Yes. All these stories. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, wow. I want to ask the questions, but like, this is so inspiring. So this is amazing. Yeah.
I mean, you can ask the questions and I can answer them if you want.
I can, I could totally, I could do that. Yeah. So what majors are the Marine Corps looking for when they approach college students?
Okay, awesome. So for majors, I like to make a joke that you can get a degree in underwater basket weaving and it does not matter. As long as you have a college degree, that is one of the requirements to be an officer in the Marine Corps. Sure, there are a couple job specialties that require a specific job training. For example, to be a lawyer in the Marine Corps, you obviously have to have a JD or be working towards your JD in your first year, second year, or third year of law school. You can start as early as your first year. So that's one of the jobs that requires a specific degree, right? And then cyber is relatively new and it doesn't require a specific cyber degree, but having a cyber background would make you more competitive for that specific job. The Marine Corps has 26 different job specialties that we are going to train you in, right? So I got my degree in criminal justice and I knew I wanted to be a military police officer. I got very lucky that I got that job assigned to me. But what I would say is that the training that you go through is going to teach you about all the different aspects about the Marine Corps jobs, right? So when you're going through your initial training, you get your job assigned to you later on in your training. When I was going through my training, there were only 3 spots for military police available. And I would tell you that if I did not get military police and I got my number 2 choice, I would have been just as happy getting that number 2 choice, even if I wasn't practicing or becoming a cop in the Marine Corps, right? The reason for that is because you're adding value, right? You're learning a different set of skills. When I first joined, I thought military police only had one side, and I thought that side was getting like writing tickets on base, the gate guards that you see when you try to enter any installation. I thought that was the only thing that military police did, and I thought I want to do that in the civilian world. So now I'm trying to do something different for 4 years, get a different type of experience, And so if I had not gotten military police, I would have been happy getting anything else because you're adding a different life experience and a set of skills that you otherwise would not have, right? So having a criminal justice degree, but being a communications officer, and then later on when you get out, applying for something like the FBI or the CIA, you are so much more competitive having a criminal justice degree with a communications background than me having a criminal justice degree and being a military police officer, if that makes sense, So we accept all majors. We'll train you in exactly what you need to do. So for example, Captain Clayton right there, she got her degree in physiology, right? I think that's what it was. And now she's a pilot in the Marine Corps. So if you had asked her 8 years ago, are you going to be flying for the Marine Corps someday? She would have told you you're crazy. But she took the aviation test. She did really well on it. And now she is living her best life out in Okinawa, Japan, flying Ospreys for the Marine Corps and loving every minute of it. So different life experience that she when she graduated college, she was a soccer coach at her university for a short stint as like assistant coach. And she realized she was using her degree, but she didn't really like that, like what she was doing. She didn't feel fulfilled at the end of the day. She wanted to serve, and now she loves her life. Like she's going to retire out of the Marine Corps after 20 years, and she never had any plans to join the Marine Corps 8 years ago. So it's pretty wild. Your job specialty is not directly tied to what you got your degree in. Use that opportunity to grow outside of your job, outside of your degree, to add value to your resume. I hope that answers your questions.
That absolutely answered the question. I think that just specifies to a lot of students as well that like your major does not have to dictate where you go in your career, or it's the polar opposite where you may have a criminal justice major and you may end up finding a job in the Marine Corps that connects to that that major if that's what you were going for, like you. So
absolutely,
yeah. So my next question is, what are some careers for criminal justice students in the Marine Corps?
Perfect. So yeah, like I mentioned, we have 26 different job specialties. And when people ask me that question, I like to ask them the question is really, how can you use the Marine Corps to add value to that very specific degree? So enter degree here, whether it's criminal justice or public affairs or international business or international relations, something like that. How can you use the Marine Corps to add more value to your resume? Going in with a criminal justice degree, sure, you can become a military police officer, right? But you can also be an intel officer. You can also be a communications officer. You can also be a public affairs officer and then serve as a liaison at a police department or a federal law enforcement agency somewhere down the line, right? Like you mentioned, it's perfect. Your degree doesn't restrict you to what opportunities are available to you, you know? So when you're applying for a program like this, I'm very passionate about my MOS, my job specialty. I loved it and I would do it again in a heartbeat. But what I tell my lieutenants is go in with an open mind, you know, because you're going to be offered so many different things that you had no idea about before you even joined the process. And then you're going to fall in love with the job specialty that you didn't even know about when you first joined, you know? And so it's a great opportunity for you to grow as an individual, grow as a leader, grow outside of what you're comfortable with and what you know, because you're always going to have that criminal justice background. But how often are you going to be able to serve as an intel officer in the Marine Corps and tie the two together? You understand? So
Absolutely.
yeah, the biggest things that you're going to take away from whether you get a criminal justice degree or forensics degree or something, the biggest thing you're going to take away from being a Marine Corps officer is that leadership opportunity, the management opportunity, the training, the experience that you're going to get, and most importantly, broadening your horizons.
Okay, that's amazing. That like perfectly sums up the question. And I think that it opens the door for a lot of students who are maybe sophomores, juniors, seniors, even freshmen, kind of redirecting what the Marine Corps, you know, accepts. It seems like it's very open to any major that you have. This is only building on to your, you know, professional skills as well as your personal skills. I'm sure you're better at communication because you're in the Marine Corps, and teamwork. There are a lot of elements that you improve in. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
What is the most challenging part of entering the Marine Corps for you?
I loved that you all asked that question because what I would say is that mental toughness to actually see it through. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that I interview with, like it says there, a lot of people are intrigued and very few are willing to put in the work. So I have that initial conversation of here's all the great things that the Marine Corps can give you if you become qualified to serve as an officer. That right, that is up to you. Are you willing to put in the work to meet those requirements, to submit an application, to get screened for selection? Because it is a selection process for the officer side. You are applying for a leadership management role. If you're applying for a leadership and management role in the civilian world, you're expected to have experience, right? In the Marine Corps, applying for that leadership and management role, you just have to meet these requirements to get screened for selection. And it's my job to make you look competitive to have your chance to go to officer candidate school. When I lay out everything that they are supposed to do in order to become qualified for this program, a handful will accept the challenge, and then the rest kind of ghost. They just poof, disappear because they realize that it's a lot of hard work and they're not willing and able to put in that hard work. So the most challenging part about actually entering the Marine Corps is that mental toughness to actually see it through, because it's very tough. It is a selection process. It's a screening process. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication. But if you're willing to put in that hard work and dedication, you will have your opportunity to get screened for selection.
That's an amazing answer. And this isn't a question on there, but it kind of opened my mind to it. Do you feel like you have become a stronger person because of the Marine Corps, not just physically, but like mentally with the trainings that you went through?
100%, Alyssa. It's pretty crazy when you see because you see the immediate transformation when you graduate from officer candidate school. You're stronger physically, right? But the mental toughness, you don't see that in someone, on their face. It's just the way that they grow through their training, the way that they carry themselves on the other end. Like I said at the beginning, I'm from here. I grew up in Hollywood, Florida. I started at FIU. I transferred to UCF after 2 years. This is home for me. This is my hometown. Coming back after serving 7 years in the Marine Corps, now as a recruiter, it is crazy to hear my family, who knows me better than anyone, say that I have significantly grown in the last 7 years. If you knew me at FIU as a freshman or sophomore, you wouldn't recognize me because I was a completely different person, like to the core, still me, right? But I am definitely much more resilient, a lot more tough, not just physically, but the mental aspect of it is what what really changed during my last, not just initial training, but my experience in the Marine Corps. I know that when a challenge is presented to me, I can take on that challenge. And in the past, when I was much younger, I would be very scared when something tough came at me, right? But knowing that I can, when I went through the training at Officer Candidate School and the training at the basic school and everything that I endured in the Marine Corps, if I can handle that, then I can handle anything that life throws at me.
That's an amazing, resilient way of looking at difficulties that may come. How has your outlook on justice changed since entering the Marine Corps?
That's a great question. So I think being a military police officer gives me that a little unique perspective, right? It has, as a civilian, I remember when something happens, as a civilian, I always thought, if I know the situation, if I know the people involved, we're always seeking immediate justice and we want, things done right now. And why is nothing getting done right away? Was my mentality for a lot of things, because as humans, we want instant gratification, right? And if somebody's wronged, you want to make sure that that person is held accountable. But the biggest thing that we want is like right now, we want them to be held accountable. Being a military police officer in the Marine Corps has given me an inside scoop of an insider's perspective of there is a process in place, right? And as a civilian, not knowing that, it was tough, very tough to trust that process. But being an insider now and looking out, I now have a unique perspective on that process. There are checks and balances in place. There's like wickets that we need to hit in order to bring this individual to justice. You can't just immediately go after them and hope that right away something is done, right? Trusting the process is really what has changed. That's the outlook that has changed for me in my last 7 years, is because I've seen it firsthand and I've seen it that it does work, but being able to trust has always been tough for me until I got the opportunity to see it from an inside looking out, if that makes sense.
No, that absolutely makes sense. And thank you for expanding on that a little bit, because the more we learn about criminal justice as college students, we're learning from books. We're not learning from real life experiences. You're coming in and explaining that standpoint, which I really appreciate. There are checks and balances. There are procedures. There are rules for a reason. You can't just jump to conclusions. So I appreciate you kind of expanding on that a little bit.
Of course.
Thank you. How does criminal justice connect to the Marine Corps?
So I would say in the Marine Corps, we have our own separate set of laws called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, right? And it's unique. As a military police officer, obviously we enforce that law, right? But as a regular Marine Corps officer in any job specialty, you are in a position where you are actually required to hold your Marines accountable, just like the Marine Corps is required to hold you accountable if something goes wrong. As a military police officer, yes, you're going to do it on an everyday basis, but you would be surprised that even as a supply officer, even as a logistics officer, you could find yourself doing investigations. Even if you're not a military police officer, if there is an investigation that ensues and you are the officer that is trusted with seeing that investigation through from start to finish, guess what? You're going to be assigned this investigation. And now it's on you to determine or give your recommendation to the commanding officer on what needs to be done for this Marine, right? And so it's really unique because even if you didn't have a criminal justice background, you still have the opportunity to enforce justice in the Marine Corps.
And just to expand on that a little bit, because of course that investigative mind, I always have more questions. Is there certain personality traits you've noticed in people who go on to become like Marine, officers and people who enjoy learning about criminal justice and who enjoy kind of questioning things and understanding procedure? Do you feel like there are characteristics you see in those people, certain like personality traits, or is it just very broad?
So I would say that, I've seen it in myself, right? So I'll give you guys an example and hopefully it answers your question. When I was going through military police officer basic course, I was the only one in that room of 14 students that had a criminal justice background. Everybody else studied finance or supply, or really they got their degree in psychology or something. They really wanted to be military police officers and they got assigned that. Because I have the education in criminal justice, I was the one asking the instructor question after question, day after day, right? Because I wanted to understand the difference between military police and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the Uniform Code of Military Justice and civilian law enforcement, because we're, like you said, we are taught a lot through books. And up until that point in my life, that's all I knew. And I really wanted to grasp the difference between the Uniform Code of Military Justice and civilian law. So I was the one asking questions day after day. But that was just me. I'm passionate about it, and I wanted to get a clear understanding. So, and they didn't even know, my instructors didn't know that I got a degree in criminal justice. Halfway through the course, they're like, you studied criminal justice or pre-law or something, didn't you? And I told the gunnery sergeant, I said, yes, Gunny, I studied criminal justice in college. I'm very passionate about it. I want to understand the difference. When they look for military police officers, from my experience, they want somebody that isn't afraid to speak up, right? Isn't afraid to ask all these questions for clarification. This, I would say, similar characteristics to what you expect from a judge advocate, somebody that's practicing law in the Marine Corps, Every student that I went through the military police officer basic course was outspoken, not afraid to ask a million questions for clarification, tough, right? Not just physically, because we're taught, like you were talking about, defense tactics that you guys have coming up. We go through defense tactics at our training as well. So that's something that somebody that can hold their own too, and then everything else they teach you. Does that answer your question, Alyssa?
Yeah, that absolutely answers my question. I feel like a lot of students are as well, opportunities like this, where they get to hear from people like you who have these experiences, they just want to know more about opportunities and careers before they make that big leap and that dedication. Because you said people cancel themselves out. They hear a challenge and either they run or they run towards it. They approach a challenge.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's opportunities like this teach a lot of our members about new career opportunities they never would have considered before, or maybe they underestimated themselves and they thought they weren't cut out for something, or it was really scary. The Marine Corps is an awesome career opportunity. And hearing from people like you, it may change someone's mind, or it may solidify what they want to do. So that's why it's important to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm glad you said that too, because one of the unique things about our program is you can start as early as your freshman year of college and essentially be trying out the Marine Corps. So what I mean by that is, if you put in the application and you meet the requirements to submit that application, if you get selected to go to officer candidate school, you go in the summertime. It doesn't pull you away from school, right? It's if you're in your freshman or sophomore year of college, you go for 6 weeks one summer and then 6 weeks the summer before your senior year. If you're a junior in college, you go 10 weeks the summer before your senior year. And if you're a college grad, you go 10 weeks after you graduate from college. If you do it as early as your freshman or sophomore year and you go through the 6-week training session, that you're exposed to the Marine Corps. You are going through Marine Corps training, and that is how you figure out if this is for you. That's what I tell people all the time, is if you're able to go to this training, but you are scared, that program is perfect for you, because you are trying out to see if the Marine Corps is a good fit for what you're trying to do. If it's too much, then okay. If you come back from that training and you say, those 6 weeks were fun, but I don't really see myself becoming a Marine Corps officer, that's okay. You don't owe the Marine Corps anything at that point. The application that you submit, all it says is, if I'm selected to go to officer candidate school, I will go to OCS for a minimum of 4 weeks. After those 4 weeks, if you decide it isn't for you, then you can leave. And the reason for that is, if you don't want to be a leader of Marines, we're not going to force you to be a leader of Marines. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. So thank you so much for expanding on that question. Everyone, if you would like to unmute yourselves one by one, or if there's any questions that you feel comfortable asking, of course, please have them be school appropriate, but we have an amazing person here who's more than happy to answer your questions. So yeah, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? I will stop sharing. Don't be scared, guys. You can ask questions. It's okay.
I have a question. What is the age bracket in order to join the e-officer program?
So you can be as young as 18 years old, or as the oldest that you can join is 42 years old. If you are between the ages of 28 and 42, you would require an age waiver, but those are granted on a case-by-case basis. I will say that the more competitive you are in terms of life experience, education, those are the things that the Marine Corps is looking for to give you that waiver. A waiver is essentially saying we're we're making an exception to policy to let you go to OCS, but you have to prove to us that you have what it takes. So clubs, organizations, stuff like that. But the age bracket is 18 to 42.
And are you required to take the ASVAB exam as well?
Good question. So there are three ways that we figure out if you qualify academically for this program. One is the ASVAB, right? But if you pass the ACT or the SAT with our qualifying scores, you're not required to take the ASVAB. So I'll start with the ACT. The ACT qualifying score is a 22. The SAT qualifying score is 1,000 points. And then the ASVAB is a 74. If you have the qualifying score on either one, SAT or ACT, you don't have to take the ASVAB. If you don't, then we'll put you on the ASVAB. I recently had a young lady who got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and a separate associate's degree from FIU, never once took the SAT or the ACT. So I had to tell a 28-year-old woman, you're going to have to take the ASVAB. And she studied for about a month and she got a perfect score on the ASVAB.
Someone had a question in the chat and they asked, can you go over what the different phases of the OCS consists of, graduation requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually know him. Hey, Andres, how are you? So we met today, actually. But so the different phases at Officer Candidate School, when you're going through OCS, a lot of people see videos about Officer Candidate School and they think it is like it's boot camp, and it is a boot camp style training. But the difference between something like boot camp and something like OCS is that Officer Candidate School, we're developing you into a leader, right? However, it is the Marine Corps, and as leaders in the Marine Corps, if that discipline and that culture is required of our Marines, guess what? It's going to be required from us as well as officers. So we are going through the same culture shock, the same discipline training. At the very beginning of our training, I would say the first 4 weeks, that first phase, that phase is really when you're in your initial shock, right? And not to scare anyone, but to be completely honest, I like to think of it as like piranhas in water, right? And that's really what our instructors are there to do, is instill discipline in us and instill that responsibility in us as well. After about the 4 weeks, that's when they're starting to pull back a little bit. So you go into your transition phase. That transition phase is really where the candidates start to take over everything. As future officers in the Marine Corps, candidates at that point, we are the ones that are basically running the show, and the instructors are just there to make sure that we don't fall on our face, if that makes sense, right? That's the point of OCS, is to make leaders of Marines. And then at the very end, it's really unique because you actually get to see the human side of the instructors, and they talk to you like a fellow human being. And it's really awesome to see them take their actual, Marine Corps drill instructor hat off, put on their staff sergeant or gunnery sergeant hat, and now they're there to mentor you rather than shooting at you on a daily basis. So, and then the graduation requirements. Andrea, you mean for OCS, or are you talking about like while you're in college?
They said for OCS.
For OCS?
Mm-hmm. For OCS.
Okay, so the graduation requirements for OCS, you have to be able to pass physically. We get graded on our physical fitness on a daily basis. We get graded on our leadership on a daily basis, and we get graded academically. So while you are going through Officer Candidate School, you actually take tests about Marine Corps history, and you're being evaluated on your physical fitness as well. You need to maintain an 80% average in every single category and all together to graduate from OCS.
Does anyone?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Galia, sorry. Just what would you say is the most scary part of the training experience?
So I would say that the scariest part for me was, like I said at the beginning, I don't have any family, friends, or any family that went through OCS or the Marine Corps. I had a few friends, but for me, it was the shock. Getting to training on that first day and immediately getting, screamed at and getting told that I suck. They don't even know me and they're telling me that I suck at everything, right? The culture shock is really the scariest part going through something like this, right? And I think any Marine that goes through boot camp or officer candidate school will say something similar. The culture shock of what you're about to experience and thinking to yourself, is this what I'm going to have to go through for 10 weeks? It's not the exact culture that you're going to go through for the full 10 weeks, but when you get there and the first time you get screamed at, for a lot of people, that is the first time in their entire life that somebody has told them that they are terrible at something, right? And it's hard for them to swallow that pill because they've never been told that before. And I've noticed that the ones that don't bounce back from something like that, those are the ones that struggle. Those are the candidates that struggle at officer candidate school. But like we were talking about the mental toughness at the beginning, that is where you develop your mental toughness, because on a daily basis, you're probably going to be told that you are terrible at something, but it's how you overcome that that makes you better on the other end. So the culture shock is really tough, but the culture shock is what makes you a better candidate and then a better Marine Corps officer in the long run.
Thank you.
Of course.
Would it be okay if we put your email or like the best way to contact you in our group chat?
For sure.
So that students can contact you if they'd like to, you know, ask more questions?
Yeah, of course. I'll put my phone number in the chat and then my email address as well. So if anybody has any other questions or something you want to ask offline, please feel free to reach out. My phone is always on me. If you want to text me rather than call, that works too, or send me an email as well.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. All right, well, I guess that I'm going to stop